Alrighty, so for those of you who are still new to some of this and you're trying to figure out what exactly we're talking about here, so let's start with the Moon Uranus conjunction. So right here we have the Moon Uranus conjunction in Aries, and over here we have a Mercury Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. The challenging aspect between these two planets is the fact that they are in a 90-degree relationship with each other, or what we label a square aspect. Okay, so it's an extremely challenging aspect, to say the least. Now, what's interesting and important to note about this particular set of planets is that they're not only in a square aspect to each other, but they're in a T-square with Jupiter. So we've got all sorts of fun stuff going on in this chart. Okay, so the first thing I want to kind of go over with you guys, anytime you're looking at a chart, right, and this doesn't matter if it's a child or an adult, we always start with the Holy Trinity, the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, because these three things, or the ascendant ruler, I should say, these three things will give you the three legs of the table that form identity or personality. So looking at the chart for this person, we already know that the moon here is in Aries and the sun is in Aquarius. The chart ruler would be the ruler of the ascendant, which is going to be Mercury and Capricorn over here as part of that Pluto configuration. So when we're talking to this person about the potential of this child chart, we're going to skip all of these outer planet stuff right now. We're going to get into that in a little bit, and we're just going to start with the absolute basics, which is the sun, the moon, and in this case, the chart ruler Mercury. So the sun is at 14 Aquarius in the 9th house. Let me get this out of the way. And this right here by itself tells us a lot. Aquarius, by its very nature, is a curious sign or expression. It's very interested in technologies, the future, progress, things that haven't been done yet. So it's very much about innovation is the word that I'm looking for. Innovation and ingenuity, right? So it's literally the sign, as we said earlier, that covers things like, I wonder what would happen if, or what they frequently call in slang, thinking outside the box. So the whole Aquarius energy or trip is very much about finding new ways to see things, and certainly new ways to see old problems. So it's very much about just change and progress and making things different and new and unusual, and being a conduit of vision and inspiration and energy for other things, transpersonal things that are of benefit to the group as a whole. Okay. With it in the 9th house is a Sagittarius house, which is also about expanding boundaries and not so much pushing limits, but as much as pushing your personal limits. So the 9th house in Sagittarius is very much about trying to understand and having a broader vision, a broader understanding of the world. And one of the ways they accomplish this is by getting out in the world into foreign environments with foreign people and foreign cultures and foreign philosophies and values and ideologies, and immersing themselves in it to try and get a real sense for not only how people do things over here or over there, but also why. Why do they do this? How did this happen? How did this come about? You'll find with heavy 9th house emphasis, you'll get people who are either very interested in spiritual and philosophical matters, because they're always debating the great issues in life, because they're trying to understand. It's all about understanding. Or you'll find people with heavy 9th house emphasis that are also in the educational system, either as teachers or perpetual students. Researchers also typically fall into this category as well. Travelers, people are very, very heavy emphasis on travel in their life, also come under this category, as well as lawyers. And lawyers and the practice of law has a lot to do with philosophy and principle and really understanding what is being agreed to and what the intent or essence of an agreement was. And whether something, is a crime and under what circumstances and for what penalties, because not all things are the same thing, sort of thing. So that's the ninth house. And with the Aquarius, the sun in Aquarius in the ninth house, what you're going to get is somebody who very much needs, because your sun represents your identity needs, or psychological needs, the things that you need to feel right with yourself in the world. So the sun in the ninth house needs a lot of breathing room, literally just room to run. But more than that, they need opportunities to expand their understanding of the world around them. That's everything for them. So the worst thing you can possibly do to somebody with a sun in Aquarius in the ninth house would be to keep them holed up in a very insulated or cloistered environment where they're never exposed to unfamiliar people, scenes, cultures, values, philosophies, anything. It's always the same all the time. Homogeny and conformity will be the absolute, is the absolute anathema or death, spiritual, psychic death for this person. So when you're talking to somebody about their kids, this is what we're looking at. So we're not going to say things like, oh, well, your child is obviously going to be a lawyer. Your child, clearly is going to be a cult leader, which is possible with this chart. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen with this particular chart. I'm just saying off the cuff. But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about what this child needs, or what this human in development needs to have a stronger sense of who they are. Because ultimately, childhood and youth is very much about developing our identity or coming into our own. The thing about it that people often forget is that it's impossible to make predictions about who or what someone's going to become. And the reason for that is because who or what we become in life has everything to do with the circumstances and opportunities that are around us and the support that we get. If you are growing up in the middle of a mountain village out in outer Mongolia, you might have all planetary aspects in your chart that would make you a fine nuclear physicist. But without circumstances and opportunities to allow you to get the education you need to advance in your studies to get to that level of skill and work and education where you would flourish, without those circumstances and opportunities, that promise in your chart may never be realized in that particular way. So all those things that give you that high level of math function and high level ingenuity and all the stuff that goes into having the temperament and qualities necessary to develop the skills to become a nuclear physicist may be applied to other things that are more germane and organic to the environment and time period that you're living in. So when you look at a chart, that's why we can't talk about, oh, well, you're clearly going to be this, you're always going to be that. You don't know. Everything depends on what is around them and what's available to them. Every now and then you get somebody who's on a very special mission in life who will surpass or exceed their current circumstances. There are many fine women in the medical field. Elizabeth Blackwell is an example, just right off the top of my head, who were born in times when women weren't even allowed to have birth control, or rights, or the right to vote, or anything. You were literally, it was Victorian times, like you were, oh God, anyway, just so primitive. And yet they went on to get educations and do amazing things for themselves. Hedy Lamarr, I think it is, one of the actresses, was a brilliant mathematician. But she became an actress, and a very famous actress. I'll have to find her information and post one of the links below. And she actually, I believe, is responsible for creating the first shortwave radio that was used to help win the war. But she's not known or credited for any of that because she was, this sexy Hollywood bombshell, and that's all the world around her wanted to see her as, and the only thing they would allow her to have as her public identity. So she did not go on to become a full-time scientist, or mathematician or researcher, and she could have been up there and surpassed Einstein in her contributions, I'm sure. But circumstances and opportunities and support, or lack of it, prevented this from happening. So always remember, no matter what we see in a chart, we have to look at potentials in terms of what is this energy trying to express, not what job will this person have or what status in life are they going to achieve. Because there's a lot more going on than just the chart, okay? And the life this person is here to live, there's more involved in their life than just their social status. So never forget that. All right, so the next thing we're going to go to is the moon, right? So the moon is conjunct Uranus in Aries. Now, there's a lot of people, there are a lot of astrologers, students, amateurs, and pros alike, a lot of astrologers, who would look at this and immediately gravitate to the more colorful aspects or the more colorful themes of this particular aspect, because Uranus is the and in Aries, it is the planet of crazy making. And with a Uranus, with a Moon Uranus conjunction, we have somebody where this Uranus energy is even more intensified because it is a part of their natural daily expression. And in the sign of Aries, oh my lord, oh god, it's like living with one of those little crank toys that they used to have years and years, or maybe even hundreds of years ago. And you would turn the crank, pop goes weasel, and this thing would pop out and scare you to death. So that kind of unpredictability and like winding up and winding up and winding up and then boom, exploding or popping up out of the can, as it were, is very Moon Uranus Aries. So it would be easy to gravitate towards that as the interpretation for that. Oh my God, what a temper. Oh, that's so, oh my God, that would be so hard to handle. It's so rebellious. Whoa. And you wouldn't be completely wrong. The problem is you would be completely wrong in the information or message that you're sending the nervous parent. Because remember, it's not the kid we have to worry about, it's the parents more often than not. And the other thing is that children and youth will always live up to your expectations or live down to them. So if we create pictures of someone being a certain way and we are viewed as the voice of authority, people will take that as gospel and interpret or misinterpret that however way it suits them at the time, without necessarily understanding the impact that this could have on the person they're projecting this onto, in this case, the kid. So with a Moon Uranus conjunction, remember with outer planets, their lifetime, they're having experiences that are far beyond and exceed what's considered customary or normal for normal people. They're having a very different experience of life because the outer planets are transpersonal planets. So there's a little bit more going on here. So on the one hand, people with outer planet contacts, when they are open and they're keeping their sanity, can be conduits for transpersonal information. So mediums, visionaries, psychics, anything that involves communicating with, the great out there and acting as a partner or a conduit or bridge to help receive information from out there and bring it down here. Like a lightning rod attracts lightning. This is what we see a lot of with outer planet stuff. On the other hand, if the person is not able to process that, or they're not prepared for that, or they haven't evolved to that, it is also equally possible that you could have somebody where this outer planet energy is very disruptive for them and they have a very hard time functioning in the world because their energy is not stable. So it's like a current fluctuation from one extreme to the other. Or it could be a situation where sometimes it's too much for the psyche to handle and there's a lot of disrepair and distress that's caused because they're having supernatural or above and beyond natural human stuff experiences in a human body, which can make it difficult. With outer planets, especially things like Uranus and Pluto, the other thing that I hear a lot of, and I'm kind of tired of it because it's an oversimplification. It's this whole, trauma and drama and oh my God. Whoo. So listen, here's the thing. All right, so Uranus and Pluto, in theory, could present or show us some form of trauma in a person's life. That's a given. But if that were the rule, not the hypothesis, right, or the suggestion, if that were the actual rule, that means that every single child born in war-torn countries in the Middle East and in other third world countries, or even Africa, where that entire village of girls was kidnapped, the Boko Haram, I think it is. All of those people, if this were the actual rule, all of those people, all of those children involved in that would have heavy Uranus-Pluto contacts, angular and prominent in their charts. Every single one of them. And what you'll find is that's not always the case. Okay, and what you'll also find is that there are people who are in these environments where they are experiencing certain levels of trauma and things that are well beyond our control that may not have such an obvious thing going on in their chart. With outer planets, contacting personal planets in the chart, oftentimes the person who carries these aspects represents or symbolizes something to other people. There's a transpersonal expression of their existence that is beyond their reach. So they don't have a lot of control over their public image because other people see them as something above and beyond themselves, right? So they represent something to other people, or they symbolize something to other people. The other thing is, depending on which personal planets are involved, which outer planets are involved, could also determine the types of things that we're looking at this person dealing with as a theme throughout their life, all right? So with a Moon-Uranus conjunction in Aries, there is very much the possibility that at some point in this person's life, as they develop and grow, one of two things could possibly happen. Or all of these things at the same time could simultaneously happen. We could have somebody who could be a channel or a conduit for information from the cosmos. Musicians and writers and mathematicians, anybody who does any kind of work where they have groundbreaking things that just come to them, it just came to me sort of stuff. They're often operating with that Uranian kind of electricity, like lightning striking sort of thing, that flash of inspiration. With a Moon-Uranus conjunction in Aries, it is entirely possible that this person will be given to bursts and fits of energetic impulses. One, because Uranus is electricity and radio waves and gamma rays, and you name the frequency. It's all about frequencies, right? Sound, light, vibration. Uranus is all about those things. So it's entirely possible this person may have a disruption in their energy field that cause them to have these bursts of energy, which could be seen as outbursts, depending on how disruptive it is in the environment they're at any given time. Or we could also have somebody who, again, the whole thing with genius and visionary qualities, things that kind of come down and strike them as inspiration out of nowhere, that turn out to be game-changing for the people around them, above and beyond their own personal needs. Or you could have somebody who is, in 3 words, batshit crazy. That's always a possibility too. Or all 3. So it's a little difficult to tell how this is going to turn out, and we don't want to have these conversations with parents and scare the devil out of them, because you don't know that. And this is not something, when we're talking about human lives and people's psychology, this is not something you can afford to get wrong or be cavalier about. So what we do know with a Moon-Uranus conjunction, especially in Aries, is that this person is going to be very energetic. They're going to have almost abrupt, explosive energy bursts. So one of the things that we know that's going to be a big thing for them is finding ways as they're growing to manage that unstable, uneven, unpredictable energy spikes. So rather than energy dips, we're looking at energy spikes, because on their low energy level, they're usually at R speed, right? So you can imagine if their low energy is R speed, what their energy spikes look like. So one of the things we'd want to talk to the parent about is about finding ways to harness, this energy. The other thing is, we know that Uranus in Aquarius, because remember, Sun's in Aquarius, so the sun is being disposited by Uranus over there with that moon. One of the other things that we know is that Uranus is a very curious sign. Uranus is the big what-if planet, right? So, and with the moon there, and the moon represents your natural daily environment, and also just your natural instincts, right? There's an instinctive curiosity that is constantly pushing boundaries, right? Playing the what-if game, and also constantly looking to test itself, to challenge itself, to see what the limits of something are. This is not a bad thing. I mean, if you've ever seen these kids out here who do parkour, which is like the free running, and if you're not familiar with it, I really recommend you go take a look at it. It's beautiful to watch. Dangerous as all get out, but beautiful to watch. It's called parkour, right? So that is very Uranus and Aries. That is absolutely pushing the limits. It's pushing the limits of human agility. It is pushing the limits of gravity. It's pushing the limits of the laws of physics. and it's innovative, and it's constantly changing, and it's constantly challenging and testing them and their abilities against something. So it's a bit of a competition, but with themselves. And this sense and energy of pushing and competition and challenging is always going to be a need, because the moon represents what we need along with the sun in this person's psyche. So one of the things we're going to look at in terms of managing this person until they get to adulthood and they have a better reign and understanding of themselves and how they're wired is finding ways, productive, healthy, constructive ways for them to deal with their innate curiosity, their need for challenge, their need for competition and to prove themselves, their need to push limits and boundaries, and their need to constantly explore and see what else can be done, right? So with this particular combination, especially with that Sun in Aquarius, with this particular person, one of the things that I would absolutely recommend, because we've also got the 9th and 11th house here involved as well, are team sports, any type of group activities that gets this person out, or this child, youth out exploring and learning things. They must be constantly mentally engaged. That is critically important for this particular person, because when they're bored and they don't have enough to do, they will find things to amuse themselves. Children who are looking for ways to amuse themselves are not children you want to leave alone for 5 minutes. Children who are looking for ways to amuse themselves and are typically looking to see how far you can push something before it breaks are definitely not the ones you want to leave alone for 5 minutes. So keeping them engaged and keeping their curiosity engaged in something productive and safe, keeping them constantly stimulated and giving them outlets to explore and build and create and dream, and work on that, where it's a challenge for them. Can they beat themselves? Can they beat the clock, sort of thing? These are the things that I would recommend doing with this person. And also, this is a very social child. So this child also is going to need lots and lots of people around them, preferably sane people, smart people. People who are active and like to do things, that are literally whip smart and right there with him. Because more than anything else, what we don't want is this person always feeling like they're the smartest person in the room or the most agile or athletic person in the room without anyone to measure against or to kind of keep them in check. It's never good for anybody, but with this one, perspective is everything, and we don't want them to lose that, right? So keeping them in good stead or good company with other people that can literally give them a run for their money will not only encourage them to achieve more excellence in their life, but it will also be a very healthy way for them to remember that as awesome and amazing and special as they are, right? They're not the only person on the planet who is just as smart and special and awesome. Sometimes you got to share the stage with folks. And besides, it gets lonely up there by yourself. So now we've covered the moon, right? And we've covered the moon, or the sun, sorry, covered the sun, and we've covered the moon, okay? Now we're going to do Mercury, which is the chart ruler. So the chart ruler is Mercury, because we have Gemini rising. So with this, there's a couple of things we're looking at. First, with Gemini rising, we know right off the top that this is a very social, curious, chatty person. And this, in combination with that sun in Aquarius and that moon in Aries with Uranus, this is definitely somebody who's a bit like, there's a show from 1,000 years ago called Dennis the Menace, where this kid literally is constantly getting into all sorts of mischief. And not because he's mean-spirited or he's a bad kid, it's just because it's just Dennis. And this is going to be the same kind of inquisitive energy that's not really sure what is wrong. They just know they wanted to know what would happen if, and then they did the what if, and then this happened, and now everybody's screaming, and they're not completely sure why everybody's upset. So this is what we've got on our hands. So that curiosity's really got to be not reined in, but harnessed and given a direction to constantly to keep them out of harm's way and everybody else out of harm's way with them. So that we get. So now we look at the chart ruler, which is Mercury, and Mercury is conjunct Pluto in the 8th house. So before we get to the outer planet, let's just look at Mercury for a second. So Mercury in Capricorn ruling the chart is going to give somebody a more sober, pragmatic mindset. Or, on the other hand, it could give us somebody who's a complete usury, opportunistic, not so nice person. It can go in a couple of different ways. One of the things that astrology cannot tell us is how this person's character will develop. That's a very personal issue. We can only hope that the person has good parents, strong set of values, and good experiences growing up that reinforce better character. But we can't control that. We can make some educated guesses about what is likely to be reinforced in this lifetime, where they're going to need the most work to do. So with the chart ruler in Capricorn, what this does, this Capricorn is a sign of resource management. It is the manager. Capricorn is the manager. So they manage everything. People, money, time. They're the people who make sure that everybody's running on time and doing what you're supposed to do. So they delegate, that's the word. Delegate, like Boss Huggy say, delegate. That's what they do. So the problem, or the challenge, I should say, with Mercury and Capricorn in the 8th, Scorpio's house, is that with Mercury in Capricorn in Scorpio's house, this is somebody who's a little too good at and a little too comfortable with using other people. And because they don't see it as using other people, they see it as making other people more useful. You know, I mean, if they're going to do it anyway, right? I mean, literally, this is the kind of mentality. So this would, under normal circumstances, this would sound like somebody who would make a very good business person. And it's possible, maybe, if that's their inclination. But the challenge is going to be that this Moon Uranus makes them very impatient and very easily bored. So if this person were to gravitate to business, the businesses that they would be best suited for will be anything that allows them to start a project and literally leave it in the hands of somebody else and then move on to something else. So entrepreneurs, you'll often find have strong Aries and or strong Uranus in their charts, because that's very much about starting things, right? Innovating things, doing something different and moving on from it, experimenting with different ways of doing things. This could also be somebody with this particular type of chart that would be very, very well suited for the sciences, you know, because they're always looking at innovation and new ways to do things and all sort of stuff, and resource management and that sort of thing. This also, with all this 8th house emphasis, this person should theoretically have an easier time getting funding for their projects if they decide to go into the sciences. And people who are in the sciences will tell you getting funding is like the hardest part of their job, and probably often the least successful, which is why a lot of research doesn't get done. It's not because people don't want to do their research, it's because they can't get the money to support the work needed to do the research. But that's a whole other conversation. It is also possible that this is somebody who could become an artist. If they were to become an artist or choose to go that route, their art would be very much about making a personal statement, right there. And it would also be very much about politics or making political statements, right? And it would very much be about community and understanding and broadening horizons, right? So kind of like Banksy, you know? It'd be a very strong statement, whatever they choose to do as far as their artwork. So there's a number of different ways that they could go with this. It's hard for us to say exactly what this person is going to choose to do. All we do know is there's a lot of energy regulation that's going to be tough for them. Staying on any type of moderate or normal kind of routine is going to be a bit of a challenge for them, because that's not their nature. This is somebody who will run from one extreme to another. So kind of like the Buddha, they will go from living in the lap of luxury to being, you know, hungry, homeless, and barely sheltered and clothed, living in the woods, starving to death because they're living a life of asceticism. You know, asceticism, one extreme or the other. This is a very challenging personality, but in this lifetime, their trip is very much about understanding, getting to the real truths of things, and more importantly, getting to the real truths of who they are and what their life is about, right? Not only for themselves, but for the world around them. What do they contribute to the world around them? What value do I have to society? Now, with that said, we start pulling in that outer planet. So now, on top of all of that, we've got Pluto in Capricorn with that Mercury. So it's not exact, but I will take it. It is close enough, okay? And with a Mercury-Pluto conjunction, and it's in the 8th house. So with a Mercury-Pluto conjunction, what you're going to get is somebody who has a very incisive mind. This is somebody who reads whose gut instincts are typically very on point and reads people very quickly. So the challenge, of course, is that with this particular combination, Uranus and Pluto involved with the personal planets, and both of these the mental planets, this is somebody who's probably going to be very, very bright, maybe too much so, because it's going to be very difficult to find enough challenges in life for him. And also, with that Mercury-Pluto conjunction in the 8th house, this is somebody who learns very, very early on about the importance of people's motivations and intentions, and will be very interested in things like psychology and reading body language and psychics and, you know, propaganda and all these things that have to do with how people process information and how to manipulate the mind. So this could go a couple of different ways in life. This could be somebody who's either very, very important and beneficial in their contributions to society, or this could be somebody who's very dangerous. Now, the thing I'd like to point out is that oftentimes when we look at charts of people who have been notorious or dangerous in this lifetime, it's not that obvious in the chart. So don't look at outer planets making dynamic aspects like this and immediately assume that anybody is a threat to society, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be wrong. Remember, in this lifetime, we're all here to do our thing. We're all here to do the repair work on our own spiritual nets. A few of us are here because we're doing double duty. We've got our own work to do on ourselves, and we also have work that we're here to do for other people, or as a symbol for other people. We're here to represent, you know, for humanity, be like a mile marker on the road so people know where we're at and how far we've come and how far we have to go. There are a few people who will do double duty in life, and that will also be their simultaneous job. They won't know that that's necessarily what they're supposed to do. They're just going to know that they're driven and compelled to do these things. They must move forward and go. It's above and beyond a sense of mission. It's just a sense of knowing, like you just know this is what you're supposed to do. And even when you're in your darkest moments, you're not completely sure what exactly is going on or which direction to turn, divine forces will intervene and drag you along whether you want to go or not, because you've got work to do whether you want to do it or not. So in this particular chart, this may be the same thing for this particular child. One of the things I'd be very careful of is having these conversations with the parents, because with parents, what we don't want to do is give them this elevated or overinflated sense of who their child should be, or this condemning, damning sense of who their child might be. So we don't want to encourage any extremes in their perception of their kid. What we do want to, especially with this particular situation where there may be something much larger than the child's individual life involved, is we want to definitely reinforce the importance of character development and strong values and humanitarian principles in this particular child, because this is somebody who's coming into this lifetime with access to a lot of transpersonal power because they have work to do. But the astrology chart does not give you character. So we would hope and we would try to encourage the parents to do as much as we can do as participants in somebody's life to encourage the better nature of the person that is growing under their mentoring, you know, as best we can. So literally, we want them, just like we want everybody else, to remind our kids to be a decent human being, because that's really what matters in life. Now, I will say here, there are a couple of caveats with this, you know, and one of them being that we can't control these things. People who have a destiny to be a particular, or I'm sorry, people who have a destiny to play a particular role in history will play that role. And it doesn't matter how well you parent them or attempt to parent them. And remember, parenting is a tough job. If it were easier, we'd all be doing it better. So even with the best intentions of parents, we may on occasion have what they used to call, a bad seed? We may have those people who are here specifically to play out a very specific role in history, you know, or in their community. And there's nothing we can do about that, except make sure that as we're raising these people from children to adults, that we take away any possible excuses for their behavior, leaving them only with the reality that everything they're doing is a matter of choice, not fate. So there's that. Now with this particular, right, So with this particular chart, so here's the thing that I thought was very interesting about this. Look at this. So right here, we've got this big old square, right? And look at that. It's a T-square with Jupiter. So T-squares are a little funny in a chart. And we're already 35 minutes, so I don't want to get too deep involved in this because we'll be here for 4 hours. But what I will say is that when you have T-squares, this amplifies and intensifies and exaggerates the pressure or the power built up in the planets and the aspects involved, right? So if you can imagine a pressure cooker, that's a classic example. So a pressure cooker is just basically a pot with a lid, but the difference is the pressure cooker, it builds pressure, builds pressure, builds pressure, builds pressure, and because it's building pressure, it makes things happen faster and more intensely, right? So T-square aspects are a lot like pressure cookers. There's a couple of other aspects do similar things, but this is kind of what we're talking about. So what it does is it increases all the energy and focus into what's considered the release valve, right? Or the leg of the T-square, which in this case is, we're right back to that Mercury Pluto in the 8th house. So one of the things that we can determine from looking at this chart is with this particular individual, as they grow into adulthood, their life will be marked because of the 8th house placement by many, many major life events that will shape their perception of people and deepen or create the need to deepen their understanding of people's motivations and intentions. Betrayal will be a huge issue for them in this lifetime, and many times they may find themselves standing alone when they should have been or feel like they should have been able to stand there with someone who has their back. It's not fair, and it's not nice, and it's not kind, but this is kind of what it is. Now, luckily for this particular person, they've got Jupiter conjunct Spica. So this is a very protective fixed star. Jupiter in Libra gives them the ability to attract very good partners and also the ability to attract a lot of support from other people. This is very important because Uranus, Aries and Uranus separately, right? So let me start here. So Aries in and of itself can be the I don't even know how to say this nice. Aries, Mars can be the asshole of the zodiac. Excuse my language. They can be real jerks. So you got to watch those folks, right? And Uranus, and this is the thing, Uranus is also just as bad. People with strong Uranus in their chart, everybody loves Uranus in theory, but the fact of the matter is Uranus in practice, if you have to be around these people for any length of time, these people can be monumental horses' backsides. And so Uranus in Aries is a bit of double whammy. So this person can be or has the capacity in this lifetime to be extremely insensitive. Oh my God, like we're talking homicide inspiring insensitive. Dear Lord. And even with that, because of this Jupiter in Libra with Spica, they're still going to have the ability to charm their way out of being murdered, which is good for them. And also still be able to garner and inspire support from other people, even though they've been bad. And even in situations where anybody else who pulled the same crap they did would literally be summarily dismissed and, left for dead in an alley somewhere, preferably on fire. Whew. So this one's going to be a handful. Now, with that said, here's the thing, right? So if we know that, like, do we tell the parent that? Do we not tell the parent that? Well, sure, we tell the parent your kid has the capacity in its lifetime to be this extreme type of personality because they need to know that. And the reason they need to know that is because that personality trait will become even worse and more unmanageable unless we are satisfying these needs. Remember, we talked about that need for stimulation, that need for challenge, that need to be around groups of people who are on par with them, that need to experiment and literally be intellectually engaged, that need to be around people who are operating at a higher functioning level intellectually and otherwise in life. As long as those needs are being satisfied, right, then the worst of this personality won't be an issue. If those needs are not satisfied, right? And we don't have groups of people that we can spend time with, that are on the same page, that are literally focused on ethics and integrity and intellectual superlativeness and science and challenges and, competing with each other to see who can be the most innovative in a positive way. If we don't have that, then what we're going to have is somebody who is basically a user, who's very good at charming and conning people into doing everything that they want and giving them nothing in return, and basically is going to act like a big baby their entire life, right? Not a pretty picture. So this person doesn't have to end up at the negative extreme as long as we are properly harnessing this stuff and pushing them in the right direction towards a more positive expression of this chart. And this is what happens when you get outer planets. So when you look at this stuff, like the first thing people want to say when they see a Mercury-Pluto conjunction or anything Pluto conjunction is, oh my God, that's just so, trauma, serial killer, criminal, people are so exhausting. And yeah, yes and no. That's the worst possible outcome you can possibly jump to a conclusion with, right? And jumping to conclusions is what a lot of bad astrologers are really good for, and it's the worst thing you can do when you're talking to people about their charts. And the other is people will look at this, and Moon Uranus in Aries, like, good God Almighty, like, listen, I'm glad this isn't my kid. I'm just glad he's not my kid, because I got enough Mars Uranus stuff going on in my chart. The two of us, it would just be messy in my house. We'd have broken dishes all the time. So there's a lot of really sensational, like hyper dramatic stuff we can go with that Moon Uranus conjunction in Aries, but that's not the way to go either. So with this, when you see stuff like this, it's not about these horrible things. It's about how do we help this person assist this child or youth into becoming and blossoming and ripening into the best possible expression they can be. And we do that by satisfying the needs that are showing up here. The other thing I just want to point out real quick, right? And when we look at this T-square, okay, so we've got some heavy hitters right here. Like that's some big A+ stuff, right? Well, look at this leg right here. Jupiter in Libra is in the 5th house, creativity, right? So this is somebody who would absolutely do really, really well with some type of artistic expression, whatever it is that he chooses to do. So I would absolutely encourage this person to get involved in the arts, which, by the way, in case you didn't know, apparently music and math go together in the brain. So people who learn music very early on have an easier time learning math than children who never learned how to play an instrument. Who knew? So satisfying the needs of the person and gearing them in a proper positive direction with a productive, constructive use of these energies does a lot to ameliorate the more heavy, negative stuff in a chart. We can't get away from our life circumstances. I mean, the circumstances we are handed in life are the things that are fated to happen to us that we must deal with. This is the hand that fate deals us. You just got to deal with it. Suffering is inevitable. Nobody gets out of here without some suffering, right? The stronger get more of it, because anyway. So philosophical stuff aside, we can't get away from that. Well, what we can do is we can help create situations where we can get the most out of these things, so that even if we can't come out of them unscathed, we can certainly come out of them stronger and better. Right now, this particular individual has a lot of really good stuff going for them. So let me just get into that real quick, and then we're going to wrap this up, because we're going to be here all day if I keep this up. Use this color. Okay. So the first thing is, remember we were talking about this and this abrasive personality, right, with this T-square, right? Well, here's the thing. One of the things I'm not particularly worried about this person being that horrible about it is because he's got Venus, beautiful Venus in Pisces. And Venus in Pisces is probably one of the kindest, most compassionate places you can have something, right? If anything, my bigger concern is that he will be taken advantage of by other people more often than not, because he's kind and because people are selfish baboons and often see kindness as weakness, which would also make sense and why he's going to learn early on about betrayal and really needing to understand people's intentions and motivations. So that's where I'm sure a lot of this is going to play into, right? That's how these two things are probably going to manifest or play out in this lifetime. The other thing is that if you look here, right, here's a grand trine in fire. One of the things about the grand trines and fires, grand trines as a rule in any of the elements are always very lucky. Grand trine and fire typically is very lucky in that they're very likable. They're very popular. People want to get behind their causes, right? So they're very, very good at inspiring warm, effusive feelings from people, whether they deserve it or not. I can tell you some grand trine and fire stories about folks. Anyway, with a grand trine of fire, they're literally their own happy little parade going down the street, and people love parades, and people love to sign on with their parade. So no matter what happens in life, he's always going to find people who are ready, willing, and desirous of getting on his parade line and marching down the street with him. So he will never be without support. There will certainly be times when he will have moments when he is without support, but ultimately, as long as he is trying to do the right thing, right here, as long as he is trying to do the right thing, okay, he'll get all the support and protection he needs through that. So the other thing that I would look at, and of course, remember, that's just beautiful. Jupiter in Libra is always good because it means you benefit from relationships, people benefit from having relationships with you, and everything in life is easier when you've got a second set of helping hands. So that he will always have somebody who's willing to help him and be helpful to him. The other thing is, look, makes a beautiful trine right there to the sun in the 9th, and it's in the 5th, 9th houses, which is phenomenal. So luck and blessings will follow this kid everywhere. Hopefully he will use his forces, power for good. Use your power for good, Luke. And in this lifetime, he's coming in having earned made a lot of good karma for himself. So he's earned a lot of merit in previous lifetimes. He's bringing with him to this one. The other things that I'm looking at that make this chart not quite so concerning, right, is here. So with Venus and Pisces, we tend to have somebody who's a bit of a pushover. You know, they're genuinely kind people, and they genuinely are very compassionate people, and they wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they've got a big soft spot, you know, for the vulnerable and the needy and the underprivileged and the underdog. Like, they're the defenders of the underdog. Mars in Aries is a champion. It is the warrior, right? So with Venus and Pisces, this is somebody who potentially could be a pushover, right? Somebody who's very easily taken advantage of and will go through the school of hard knocks repeatedly over and over and over again until they kind of figure out how to manage people like that. However, that Mars in Aries right there, so close to that Venus. Now these two kind of come together like a dance partners, right? Mars in Aries loves being at home in the sign Aries. That is its natural place. So he is a natural crusader and champion for the underdog. So this is somebody who's going to shine best when they're doing things for the benefit and protection of other people. And that gives me hope. And I think he'll learn very early on. He'll just naturally gravitate to it. That this feels right for him. So hopefully he will have a good sense of who the people are that need him, you know, that need his championing. And it will be people who truly, truly deserve care and protection, and not people who are running around whining. Oops, where did everything go? Come back. There we go. Yep. Ah, sorry. People who truly deserve, not people who are whining about how awful their life is because they didn't get to go on their 3rd vacation this year, or, you know, because they lost $1 million in the stock market or whatever. You know what I mean? And yes, okay. So that is where we're going to stop here. There's a lot going on here. So all of this is to say that people with outer planet presence, especially conjunct our personal planets, this is not something to be terrified of. This is not gloom, doom, trauma, and disaster. If anything, this person's life will represent and actions will represent or symbolize things that are important for other people. There's a very transpersonal element when you have outer planets conjuncting the inner ones. And the hard aspects, conjunctions, squares, and oppositions, always give this person even more energy or power at their disposal if if, and here's the caveat, folks, especially for you guys out there that have outer planets on your inners, it only comes through when it's time for you to have it. So it's not one of these things where you can personally activate it. It's not like your Mars muscle where you can just go activate your Mars by doing Mars things, right? It's not like your Venus muscle where you can go and activate your Venus by, engaging in Venusian things. These are outer planet or transpersonal planets. So there is a bit of dissociation, I want to say, or liberation of the ego from the self in order for these things to come through, because these are high wattage planets. And in order for it to transfer into or through the person that it is working with and using them as a conduit, the person, without short-circuiting them and having them end up in a loony bin, the person must be able to manage these things and step aside. So there's a part of you that actually has to be removed from the equation in order for this to activate and work through you, because ultimately transpersonal planets work through you. It's not about you. Totally different thing. So anybody with these transpersonal planets conjunct or inner planets will tell you this is not a fun trip, and this is not something we would actively encourage other people to experience, because the experiences that you go through as a result of it are tremendous and difficult, and certainly much more unusual and isolating and excessive compared to what normal people have to go through. But it's all part of the building exercise to make you ready to handle these kinds of energies. To do the work that you are capable of doing with it, if we can just get the ego, out of the way a little bit. Meditation helps. Kundalini practices help, but I would not recommend that without a good instructor. I would start, if you don't meditate, do not start out going into a Kundalini. It's like jumping onto the Autobahn after you get your driver's license and thinking you can drive. And again, not anything you need to worry about. So this is not something, we don't need to worry about how this is going to manifest or present. What we want to work on, especially with children and youth, is how to create an environment that allows them to navigate and manage and harness this energy, or these energies and these conflicts and challenges, these demands of the chart, so that the better sides of them have an opportunity to develop. Because if we don't satisfy the needs of the chart, they will rear their demanding little heads, and typically in ways we weren't prepared for, and certainly in more disruptive ways. So we want to try and keep these things as non-disruptive as possible. All right, so yes, now 52 minutes. I'm going to end this right here. And that is how, or that's the beginning of how, we'll do this in a couple of parts, but this is basically how I would go about looking at a chart if I were reading the chart of a child or youth for a parent. Okay, so remember, folks, it is not about what you do in this lifetime. It's about who you become, and ultimately who we become has a lot to do with 50% chart, 50% are circumstances and opportunities and the support we're getting. So as astrologers and lay people and parents, we always want to look at what does this child need to express the better sides of themselves. How can I support the better development of what's the potential we see in this chart. So, and we're not going to focus on the bad stuff, because children and adults both will rise up or lower down to your expectations. So let's expect them to be capable of being the best possible version of themselves and assist them in that way, and they will always come through, and oftentimes in ways we couldn't have predicted. All right, there you go.